afraid on that one day of the year, and in the evening, oh, rapture and delight! we went to Kitty Marr's party. It was a fine December evening. The sharp air of morning had mellowed until it was mild as autumn. There had been no snow, and the long fields, sloping down from the homestead, were brown and mellow. A weird, dreamy stillness had fallen on the purple earth, the dark fir woods, the valley rims, the sere meadows. Nature seemed to have folded satisfied hands to rest, knowing that her long wintry slumber was coming upon her. At first, when the invitations to the party had come, Aunt Janet had said we could not go, but Uncle Alec interceded in our favour, perhaps influenced thereto by Cecily's wistful eyes. If Uncle Alec had a favourite among his children, it was Cecily, and he had grown even more indulgent towards her of late. Now and then I saw him looking at her intently, and following his eyes and thought, I had somehow seen that Cecily was paler and thinner than she had been in the summer, and that her soft eyes seemed larger, and that over her little face in moments of repose there was a certain languor and weariness that made it very sweet and pathetic. And I heard him tell Aunt Janet that he did not like to see the child getting so much the look of her Aunt Felicity. "Cecily is perfectly well," said Aunt Janet sharply. "She's only growing very fast. Don't be foolish, Alec." But after that Cecily had cups of cream where the rest of us got only milk, and Aunt Janet was very particular to see that she had her rubbers on whenever she went out. On this merry Christmas evening, however, no fears or dim foreshadowings of any coming event clouded our hearts or faces. Cecily looked brighter and prettier than I had ever seen her, with her softly shining eyes and the nut-brown gloss of her hair. Felicity was too beautiful for words, and even the Story Girl, between excitement and the crimson silk array, blossomed out with a charm and allurement more potent than any regular loveliness, and this in spite of the fact that Aunt Olivia had tabooed the red satin slippers and mercilessly decreed that stout shoes should be worn. "I know just how you feel about it, you daughter of Eve," she said, with gay sympathy, "but December roads are damp, and if you are going to walk to Mars you are not going to do it in those frivolous Parisian concoctions, even with overboots on. So be brave, dear heart, and show that you have a soul above little red satin shoes." "Anyhow," said Uncle Roger, "that red silk dress will break the hearts of all the feminine small fry at the party. You'd break their spirits, too, if you wore the slippers. Don't do it, Sarah. Leave them one wee loophole of enjoyment." "What does Uncle Roger mean?" whispered Felicity. "He means you girls are all dying of jealousy because of the Story Girl's dress," said Dan. "I am not of a jealous disposition," said Felicity loftily, "and she's entirely welcome to the dress, with a complexion like that." But we enjoyed that party hugely, every one of us, and we enjoyed the walk home afterwards, through dim, enshadowed fields where silvery starbeams lay, while Orion trod his stately march above us, and a red moon climbed up the black horizon's rim. A brook went with us part of the way, singing to us through the dark, a gay, irresponsible vagabond of valley and wilderness. Felicity and Peter walked not with us. Peter's cup must surely have brimmed over that Christmas night. When we left the Marr house he had boldly said to Felicity, "May I see you home?" And Felicity, much to our amazement, had taken his arm and marched off with him. The primness of her was indescribable, and was not at all ruffled by Dan's hoot of derision. As for me, I was consumed by a secret and burning desire to ask the Story Girl if I might see her home. But I could not screw my courage to the sticking place. How I envied Peter his easy, insouciant manner! I could not emulate him, so Dan and Felix and Cecily and the Story Girl and I all walked hand in hand, huddling a little closer together as we went through James Frewen's woods, for there are strange harps in a fir grove, and who shall say what fingers sweep them? Mighty and sonorous was the music above our heads as the winds of the night stirred the great boughs tossing athwart the starlit sky. Perhaps it was that aeolian harmony which recalled to the Story Girl a legend of elder days. "I read such a pretty story in one of Aunt Olivia's books last night," she said. "It was called The Christmas Harp. Would you like to hear it? It seems to me it would just suit this part of the road." "There isn't anything about ghosts in it, is there?" said Cecily timidly. "Oh, no. I wouldn't tell a ghost story here for anything. I'd frighten myself too much. This story is about one of the shepherds who saw the angels on the first Christmas night. He was just a youth, and he loved music with all his heart, and he longed to be able to express the melody that was in his soul. But he could not. He had a harp, and he often tried to play on it, but his clumsy fingers only made such discord that his companions laughed at him and mocked him, and called him a madman because he would not give it up, but would rather sit apart by himself, with his arms around his harp, looking up into the sky, while they gathered around their fire and told tales to while away the long night vigils as they watched their sheep on the hills. But to him the thoughts that came out of the great silence were far sweeter than their mirth, and he never gave up the hope which sometimes left his lips as a prayer, that some day he might be able to express those thoughts in music to the tired, weary, forgetful world. On the first Christmas night he was out with his fellow shepherds on the hills. It was chill and dark, and all except him were glad to gather around the fire. He sat, as usual, by himself, with his harp on his knee and a great longing in his heart. And there came a marvellous light in the sky and over the hills, as if the darkness of the night had suddenly blossomed into a wonderful meadow of flowery flame, and all the shepherds saw the angels and heard them sing. And as they sang, the harp that the young shepherd held began to play softly by itself, and as he listened to it, he realized that it was playing the same music that the angels sang, and that all his secret longings and aspirations and strivings were expressed in it. From that night, whenever he took the harp in his hands, it played the same music, and he wandered over all the world carrying it. Wherever the sound of its music was heard, hate and discord fled away, and peace and goodwill reigned. No one who heard it could think an evil thought. No one could feel hopeless or despairing or bitter or angry. When a man had once heard that music, it entered into his soul and heart and life, and became a part of him forever. Years went by. The shepherd grew old and bent and feeble, but still he roamed over land and sea, that his harp might carry the message of the Christmas night and the angel song to all mankind. At last his strength failed him, and he fell by the wayside in the darkness. But his harp played as his spirit passed, and it seemed to him that a shining one stood before him with wonderful starry eyes, and said to him, "Lo, the music thy harp has played for so many years has been but the echo of the love and sympathy and purity and beauty in thine own soul. And if at any time in the wanderings thou hast opened the door of that soul to evil or envy or selfishness, thy harp would have ceased to play. Now thy life is ended, but what thou hast given to mankind has no end, and as long as the world lasts, so long will the heavenly music of the Christmas harp ring in the ears of men." When the sun rose, the old shepherd lay dead by the woodside, with a smile on his face, and in his hands was a harp, with all its strings broken. We left the fir woods as the tale was ended, and on the opposite hill was home. A dim light in the kitchen window betokened that Aunt Janet had no idea of going to bed until all her young fry were safely housed for the night. "Ma's waiting up for us," said Dan. "I'd laugh if she happened to go to the door just as Felicity and Peter were strutting up. I guess she'll be cross. It's nearly 12. "Christmas will soon be over," said Cecily with a sigh. "Hasn't it been a nice one? It's the first we've spent all together. Do you suppose we'll ever spend another together?" "Lots of 'em," said Dan cheerily. "Why not?" "Oh, I don't know," answered Cecily, her footsteps lagging somewhat. "Only things just seem a little too pleasant to last." "If Willy Fraser had had as much spunk as Peter, Miss Cecily King mightn't be so low-spirited," quoth Dan significantly. Cecily tossed her head and disdained reply. There are really some remarks a self-respecting young lady must ignore. End of chapter 3.